What is up? What is up? What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. We're here with you guys live post game after the NBA Finals Game 3, Denver versus Miami. Definitely an exciting one. But before we get started, I'm your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co host.
Christopher Wells.
Yes, so we are back once again with another live reaction, recap, thoughts, discussions on the post game for this game. So I guess to kick this thing off, Denver took this one 109-94 in Miami. Um, and we talked about it on our last episode of the podcast. Please check that out. And we'll have a new episode out on Friday. But we talked about it, and you know, we said that there could potentially be a scenario where you know, I was thinking that Denver is probably going to split this one too. So I think, the next game, I think Miami's probably going to win. But, I think it's going to probably be 2-2 by the end of the week. That's just my take on it. And I think you agreed with me as well. So
Yeah.
I think we're in the same boat, in general on that. But let us know, please let us know in the comments or in the chat or anything, what what your prediction is. Um, but yeah, to get into this game, like I said, 109 victory, um, 109-94 victory for Denver. Very, very, very big monster game from Jokic and Jamal Murray. Shout out to those guys. They've been balling on a different level. Jamal Murray, I feel like we have to start with because I think I'm not going to say he had the biggest impact, but it was pretty big because he was hitting tough shots after tough shots, penetrating, just literally taking apart the defense in ways that are kind of similar to what we saw in the bubble for him, especially coming off of a bad game. So he did have 34 points, plus 14 plus minus, which I mean, I guess you could take that with a grain of salt. But in general, he had a great game 10 assists, 10 rebounds, 50% from three, which is great because sometimes he can be a little streaky. But nonetheless, he did shoot 50%, which is a great percentage, and 12 for 22 from the field. So, I kind of want to focus on him a lot because I feel like he hit some really tough shots, clutch shots, momentum shifting shots as well. Like I said, the three threes that he hit, I thought were very, they came at the right moment. You know what I mean? So I just don't know how well Miami's going to be able to limit these guys unless they obviously have stinker nights. You know what I mean? Because we did see, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter Jr. stink up the joint a couple nights ago. But nonetheless, Jamal Murray had a great game, and this is what you want for Denver. Um, I feel like in terms of Denver, when these guys play well around Jokic playing well, they're pretty much the championship is a lock for them, in my opinion. And then moving on to Jokic, he had 32 points with 10 assists, 21 rebounds. Huge game from him, I thought as well. 12 for 21 from the field, and then 1 for 2 from three. So it's just hard to limit Jokic because I saw Miami throwing triples at him, doubles, even single coverage. It's like there's no way that you can really limit him. And like I said, I feel like Denver's wins and Miami's wins are all dependent on how well Denver's bench and also their supporting cast play game to game. And when, like I said, when they have a good game, they're pretty much unbeatable. Um, and then moving on, you have Aaron Gordon, 11 points. I feel like his defense was pretty solid in terms of not necessarily blocks and things like that, or steals and things like that, but his ability to get in the mix and just be there as an intimidation factor, both on the perimeter and in the interior, was great. He had 10 rebounds, and 7 of those were defensive rebounds, so I thought that was pretty solid from him. 5 for 10 from the field as well. So I just feel like I don't know because it's hard to talk about Denver because they're so spotty, and that's one of the question marks that we did have with Denver coming into these playoffs in general was their supporting cast. What are you going to get with these guys? But in this game, they did what they needed to do. And I'll probably let you talk about Miami a little bit, but I don't know. Or you can start with Denver as well. But what were your actually? Let's start with Denver. What were your thoughts on Denver? Because I feel like they did play a really good game. And the lead was larger than this at multiple points in the game as well. So this final score doesn't tell the true story, but I'll let you get into it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we can kind of start off with was definitely Denver came in with a better defensive effort and intensity
Sure.
than we saw in game 2. I thought, in game 2 they started off pretty slow. And for what it was worth, right, it was a tie game.
Sure.
going into the at the end of the first quarter, and even for most of the second quarter, it was a tie game. And Denver kind of pulled away to close. But that's kind of where it started, right? Because Denver's defense at different points, like I said last game, I thought was bad. Some of the worst that we've seen from them in these playoffs, especially since they've gone on that winning streak, right? Because I think they had come into game two winning like their last 7 playoff
Yeah.
games,
Yeah.
I believe. So, I mean, just in general, I think that's the first thing. Even guys like Michael Porter Jr., right, who had 2 points, right, and was 1 for 7 on offense, I thought he still gave a much better effort defensively.
Sure.
And also made an effort on the boards, right? But at the same time, right, like some of the adjustments, right, they changed the rotation up a little bit, right? Michael Porter Jr., his minutes were lowered. Even though he did play better defense and, competed on the boards, his offense was kind of a problem at times. So, in the fourth quarter, they rolled with Bruce Brown, right? We saw Christian Brown, right, be like an X factor, right, in this game, right, where he comes in the third and fourth quarter and he makes all the difference, right? Being able to play downhill,
Yeah.
playing hard defensively, right? I think he even got, a runaway steal and a dunk in
Yeah.
transition. So,
He
I
looked
mean,
like LeBron out there. And shout out
yeah,
Christian Brown because I completely forgot about him. Sorry.
yeah, exactly. He got it up to I think a 21-point game.
Yeah.
So that was kind of one of the keys in this game was like a couple of the starters for Denver were kind of spotty, but you got, obviously Jokic and Murray were really good. And then you got just enough from the other guys, right? Like Aaron Gordon, like you said, didn't do as much in terms of scoring, but he, competed on the boards, right? Pushed
Exactly.
the break or pushed the ball out in transition,
Yeah.
made some solid passes. Caldwell Pope, plus minus of 12, but like I said, I didn't really think he was that great this
He was all
game.
right.
Right, Jeff Green came in like for what, like a little bit and hit a couple of shots, right? But
Right.
again, it was really Jokic and Murray, right? Aaron Gordon,
Yeah.
Christian Brown, right, and Bruce Brown. And even Bruce Brown offensively wasn't great, but again, just the way he competed on defense, he got 3 blocks, one including I think on Bam.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. I thought one thing that was kind of random was we got the 1 minute at the end of the first quarter with Reggie Jackson. I didn't really understand
Yeah.
what that was all about, but
I didn't understand that either. I would have
yeah.
thought, put in somebody else, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but overall, I think that's kind of where you have to start with Denver is just the defensive intensity
Mhm.
from start to finish was much better. Right? Because again, they weren't, shooting crazy from three, right? This was another not great 3-point shooting game for them
Sure.
again. Right? In fact, it was the worst one, I think, of these 3 games. They were
Yeah.
5 of 18 from three, but they got to the line a ton and they attacked the basket, right? And you could see that was an emphasis as well. Right, where there wasn't as much settling for jumpers, right? Even Christian Brown, right? He had 15 points and he took 1 3 that hit the side of the backboard, but outside of that, everything else was just drives and attacks. Attacking Miami's zone, right, where the zone defense wasn't as effective this game. And I think part of that was like in terms of the adjustments, right? Putting in a guy like a Christian Brown, playing him over like KCP, right, who, Brown attacks more. So I mean like, things like that in terms of attacking that zone defense, getting downhill, competing on the boards, right, to kind of make up for the lack of 3-point shooting. So okay,
Jokic the
so we
goat.
gotta yeah, he's got a ways to go for that, but he's obviously,
I,
an incredible player right now.
I
But
guess.
I
I
think
guess. I
God,
mean, should we talk about Jokic and I mean, should we talk about him in depth? Just to kind of break
um,
down, what he did in this game. I guess.
I mean, yeah, I mean, of course,
Sure.
like I mean, again, like he, like you said, Murray set the tone with that scoring punch, right, for a good chunk of the game. But of
Mm-hmm.
course, they also did some other things where you saw a lot of dribble handoffs, right, pick and
Yeah.
roll, right. 2-man game, we saw a lot more of that, but it was more dribble handoffs. Right, and Miami didn't really have as much of an answer for that. Of course, Jokic, right? We know all those little flip shots he's got around the
Yeah.
basket, right?
It's
We even
crazy.
saw a couple of Sombor shuffles.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
right, not threes, right? But
Yeah.
closer to the free throw line area. It's just kind of funny at this point where it's like, what does a bad game from him look like, right? Because he's been pretty good pretty much every game, right? And so it's
Right.
like, what is a bad game for him? Like
Right.
20, 10 and 8 or something like that. Right?
Exactly. Like, is
Yeah,
that what we constitute as a bad game or underwhelming game from him? I feel
exactly.
like
We
he's
just
just
have
so special. No glazing
yeah,
stuff.
yeah, exactly. We just haven't really seen, that consistency, in these playoffs, but we've seen it from him, right? And that's
Yeah.
again, that's one of the big things that's made the difference is you can pretty much rely on him every game. You just need a little bit more, help from the supporting cast, or he didn't get hurt in the bubble. I think did he get hurt in the bubble? I thought he played.
In the bubble, I think he did get hurt in the bubble, right?
I think it was after the bubble. He tore his ACL the following year.
So they lost in the bubble with
Lost
Jamal
in the
Murray.
bubble. the Lakers,
Right.
and then the following year they went to the playoffs, and Jamal Murray tore his ACL in the regular season.
Got you.
I
Okay,
think it was
you're right. I
against
think you're right.
LA. Yeah, so then they played Portland in the first round and won, and then they got swept, I think, or lost in 5 to Phoenix in the second round. That was the year Phoenix made the finals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Brown
think
is a
Murray was there.
solid.
He was because the bubble was where he broke out. That was where everybody was like,
You,
"Wow,
you're
this
right.
guy's."
You're right. You're right. You're right. Brown is a solid role player. I can see him being a starter with more development.
Yeah,
Hey, it's his rookie year, man. Like,
yeah.
and I think he, went 21st or something. Um,
It was in the bubble?
we gotta Google this. Hang on.
Okay, because I remember him cooking up in the bubble. Yeah, because I remember the bubble was
Me too.
where
I remember that.
because the highlight of him making the switch hands layup. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. He got hurt in the regular season the following year, and then he
Yeah,
tore.
he
That
went
was
down
when.
in April 12th, 2021.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That was in the regular season.
You're
It
right.
was
Yeah.
right at the end of the game too, where like they should have taken him out, and then he tore his ACL. I
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah,
Yeah.
because that was
Denver's
a
had a
team.
long road to get here.
Yeah,
It's
because
crazy.
that was a team where coming out of the bubble, you were like, wow, this team, is on its way where they're in the conference finals, and then they should be there to stay. And then they got hurt right for 2 straight years,
Yeah, it
and
was rough.
now they're back in it. So, but yeah, with the Brown thing, yeah, he is a rookie. It is kind of fascinating because during the earlier rounds, right, he had stretches where he would come in, and make an effort. The only round they cooked everyone in the bubble, but they didn't. What?
What?
They were in the
They
playoffs
were
in
they
the
were they were in the playoffs in the bubble,
conference
bro. They
finals,
they they lost to the
lost to
Nugget
the
or
Lakers.
the Lakers, excuse me.
Yeah, but anyways, so yeah, I remember in the first 2 rounds he would get minutes where he would play, relatively well. He didn't play as much in the Lakers series because they were kind of just, backing off of him and daring him to shoot
Yeah,
because he
and that
lost
and
in
he
games,
was
but
shooting. He wasn't cutting like
exactly,
that.
exactly. But against Miami, you're seeing him, just much better execution from
Hmm.
him. That's kind of the key, right? Because again, Denver needs, guys to help them out because we know, like you said, sometimes some of the other guys can be a little bit spotty. Yes, you are.
Yeah, you are OC, bro. You need to
But
go to sleep. I'm kidding. Stick around, man.
yeah, but anyways, yeah, like with some of these guys, right? Obviously, these guys help them get to the finals, but we know,
Sure.
right? There's gonna be random games where like a Caldwell Pope or a Michael Porter Jr. just doesn't play very well.
Right.
So you need to have guys that you can kind of insert in, to help you out on both ends of the floor, and that was Christian Brown in this game for sure. He was
Yeah.
kind of one of the biggest difference makers because you know like you said, the score got out of hand eventually. I think in the third quarter they went up by as much as like 19, and then
Yeah.
Duncan Robinson hit a couple of buckets. I think, or no, he hit a three, and then Butler hit a mid range to get it back,
Yeah.
to a more manageable
You're right.
14-point game. And then Denver once again with Christian Brown went on a big run, got it up to like what 21, something like that.
Yeah, I think it
So
was around 21, 23 or something like that. Yeah, I think it's
exactly.
21.
So yeah, so that was kind of the difference there because it was a close. Obviously, it was back and forth at halftime, but they controlled the second half. Is only helpful on defense, right?
Somewhat even, I mean, I guess, his length and, pause,
Yeah,
but, his ability to, hinder shots because he's so
yeah,
tall.
he's 10 with long arms. Is
Exactly.
exactly. They
But
had him on
he's
Butler
he's by
for
no
some.
means an elite defender, but,
Yeah.
he is definitely not a factor on offense, at least the past 2 games.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much offensively, he's just. It feels like he's almost just been relegated to a jump shooter. I think he only
I
took a
know.
couple threes
He took
in
like
this
2
game.
threes.
Yeah, because a couple of his misses were when he got the offensive rebounds, which
Right.
again, like you appreciate the effort there,
Sure.
but
And
yeah,
he's
the jump
plus
shot
11.
isn't falling. Exactly. It's just when the jump shot isn't falling, he's not going to help you as much on
No.
offense. Obviously, you can't leave him alone because he still is a very dangerous shooter.
They
And you
dared him
expect,
tonight, though.
yeah, and at some point you would hope and expect for him to break out, but again, the good news is you got a couple other, guys to help you out. Yeah, at all. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a rough series for him for the most part, but yeah, that's it's kind of that's where a guy like a Christian Brown, or a Bruce Brown can kind of help you out, right? Because again,
exactly.
like there's gonna be, when you're not talking about your main guys, the other guys are gonna have games or series where they just don't play as well.
Sure.
We saw that with a bunch of other teams, right? Where, again, if you're not like a superstar, there's just gonna be certain matchups where you're not as needs to incorporate. Yeah, he does take a lot of like just bad, really forced, rushed
But
shots.
at the same time, like, I can't blame him for doing that because, like Mo said, he's using his height and the point of contest is so high for him. So it's like,
Yeah.
I guess it's still open, but good Lord, it looks bad.
Yeah.
But back to your point about the role players and guys having off nights. I guess we should really kind of segue into Miami and what this means for them. Going into the next game. I think they're probably going to win the next one. I think they're going to bounce back. I think both these teams are probably going to split these 4 games. So that was our prediction for it. But look at Miami's side. Only wait, what? Only people taking advantage of height is Gordon and Jokic. Sure, I agree. And I feel like with Jokic, it's definitely on the offensive end, and Aaron Gordon, it's both on offense and defense. Because I mean, I feel like he's just kind of a wall that kind of sits there, and then Jokic is the last line of defense. That's the way that I look at it. Um, but yeah, to kind of segue into Miami, we do have to look at them as well. Jimmy Butler, he had 28 points, 11 for 24, 1 for 4 from three. I feel like we've seen better from him. Uh, Definitely not the ideal game, especially since some of his points were kind of, at the point where it's like, okay, well, they're not going to win this game. So, it's neither here nor there, but, he did have 28. So I guess shout out to him. Bam Adebayo, I feel like he had a pretty decent defensive game, I guess. But at the same time, you really can't even say that really because, they were kind of paint mashing on him. But, he did have 22 points, 8 for 10 from the line, 17 rebounds, 3 assists, 7 for 21 from the field. Just kind of ugly. He did start off fairly well, I thought, but as the game went on, you could
He
just
pulled
kind of
off.
see that the wear and tear was kind of getting to him guarding Jokic and being the paint defender. It's hard. It's hard to guard Denver
Yeah.
when they're on fire, and
And the
that's
jump
kind of what
shots
we're
that he
looking. Yeah,
and the jump shots that he was getting, at different points through the game because he was hitting a lot of them early on, and then in the fourth quarter, I feel like he just kind of probably ran out of gas.
if Jokic isn't close to at least
Yeah, I
10
mean,
assists in games, yeah, and that's because if you look at what Denver is, they're predicated on Jokic facilitating and the other guys hitting their shots. So if Jokic can't get assists, that means by logic that Denver's not making their shots or, they're not getting to the rim, whatever it may be. So yeah, I think that's a logical way of looking at, how these games could potentially play out.
right? Because like Jokic in game two, he had 41, and I think he only had 4 assists, but it wasn't
Yes,
like he wasn't passing the ball.
exactly.
It
They
was just
weren't
guys
making
who
anything.
weren't necessarily hitting shots, and
Right.
that's for the most part, that's kind of what it's going to come down to for Denver is their offense because they're a more offensive oriented team, so they
Exactly.
need to usually do a good job in terms of scoring at a pretty effective rate in order to win. I mean, you could say that about a lot of teams, but like I said, Denver's team is built primarily through their offense, right? Because that's what
Right.
Jokic is. He's an offensive machine. That's his greatest strength and asset, right? Is being able to run the offense and score at the same time. So
Yes.
pretty much and we've said this at perfect times, right? Like or at different times. Like the perfect game for him, right, is if he's got somewhere between like 25 to 30 with double digit rebounds and
Right.
assists, right? That's the game that he likes to play, right? Like, and some guys are like that. They didn't double him as much. Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
And like they didn't have to. I mean, they were staying home on other guys because they knew like that's the other thing with Jamal Murray, right? Like both him and Jokic, I think, like you said, have to play well in order
Yep.
for them to win because those are your two best players. Like Miami does have a chance, but I don't think you're probably going to slow down Jokic. So you have to kind of focus on taking out the other guys. And if that means that Jokic is going to get like 40, plus points, all right, well, so be it because they haven't won any games so far yet when he has like those huge scoring games, right? Because usually if he's got 40, how many points do the other guys have? And again, it's
Yeah.
not his fault. It's just, again, when other guys aren't hitting shots, you're kind of just going to him anyways. But yeah, after winning game two, Miami definitely has a chance. And, it always felt like, Denver was the better team, but you still
Sure.
give the other team a chance just
Easily.
because, again, they're in the finals and we've seen them compete against teams, that in theory were better than them.
Yeah. And if
But they're
they
not going to win. Yeah, but they're not going to win games playing like the way they played tonight. Because, like
yeah,
you said, right, Jimmy Butler, right, he had 28, right, but some of those came from when the game was over,
exactly.
and it just wasn't that efficient. And I know his ankle, I think, is kind of bugging him,
Yeah.
right, but and he's doing things, in impacting the game in other ways, on
Hmm.
defense. And I thought in game two, his passing and facilitating was pretty good. But
Yes.
again, like in this game, he only had 4 assists, and Bam only had 3 assists because nobody could hit a shot, right? Like you look at Bam and Jimmy, and then you look at the rest, right? Gabe Vincent, he was 2 for 10 with 7 points. He also got into foul trouble really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, with a couple of unfortunate fouls called on him. But again, like not much you can do about that. Matt Strus, right? 1 for 7, 3 points. Kevin Love, right? 2 of 5 from three, 6 points, not terrible, right? And then again, you look at the rest. Duncan Robinson, 9 points, 3 of 6, right? But a couple of those again, I think were when the game was over, right? And
Yeah.
he kind of hit a couple of shots to kind of have one of those fake comebacks. And then Caleb Martin, right? He was okay, right? 10 points, 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 fouls though, but certainly not as effective as he had been in the Boston series, and that's
Yeah.
obviously also kind of made a difference as well. Um, and then it almost kind of feels like at this point they do need Tyler Hero. I mean, obviously you'd like to have him back anyways,
Yeah.
um, right? But you would think offensively he would help. But I do kind of wonder because again they've been on such a groove, this entire postseason. Without him for the most, pretty much the whole postseason. Um, so you kind of wonder how does he get slotted back in? Denver's big lineup is top tier in my exactly. That's
Yeah.
kind of one of the issues
Size.
with
Yeah, we
Miami as
said
well
that
as
from the jump.
the size difference. They've been much better battling it.
Hmm.
Um, and part of it was because the starters again weren't that great, other than Jokic and Jamal Murray, or
Right.
and then I guess Gordon.
Right.
But yeah, you know, that's kind of the key going into the series was how does Miami battle Denver size? And again, they have guys where even though they're smaller, they still battle, right? Like Kyle Lowry, even though he's at a pretty significant disadvantage size wise, he
Hmm.
still competes. He is a physical guy, even though he's only 6 feet, but he's a bigger guy.
Yeah.
Um, right? Caleb Martin, right, is undersized for his position, right? But he competes. Same with Bam, same with Butler, right? A lot of these guys, are well. Butler's not small for his position, but most of the other guys are.
Yeah.
Um,
It's pretty
where
much
even though
everybody
they're
but Butler.
yeah, exactly. And that's again kind of the key for them is they have to be physical against Denver, right? And again, play hard because again they're not as talented, so they have to win on those other margins, right? And
Yeah.
again, so like the 3 point shooting, right? In game two, they shot what 50% from three,
Yeah. And in this one,
right?
they
With,
shot
like
31.
14. Yeah, exactly. And then this game, like you said, 31 from three and 37 from the field, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to get it done, right? So you got to
With,
be better.
yeah.
Yeah, and it
Like,
felt like
it's so
um,
weird. It's so
yeah,
weird. I
and
was
it
just
felt
going to say, like, that, I agree with, the point that, if they do stick to what they did in game two defensively, they can win, but their offense has to be like it was in game two as well. They have to shoot well, they have to get to their spots, and you can't just have Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo basically carrying the squad. You got to have either Caleb Martin, Gabe Vincent, or hopefully Tyler Heroes. Somebody, step up a little bit on the offensive end, scoring, because I feel like them scoring off the dribble is something that has clearly been kind of nagging them, and that seems like that's their Achilles heel outside
yeah,
of, dealing with Jokic.
right, because you're watching Denver and like you mentioned with Jamal Murray, he would have some of those shots right at the end of the clock, right where he
Right.
gets to a spot off the dribble, and just drains a tough shot right at the end of the
Exactly.
clock. And, you know, again, a cup right, Butler can sometimes do that,
Sure.
obviously, right? Bam with those pull up shots, occasionally, right? But again, obviously his biggest strength is attacking the basket.
Yeah.
Um, and they have guys that can hit tough shots, but like you said, it would help diversify their offense a little bit. But I also just think Denver's defense was better
Sure.
in this game. Where you again the effort, right? And that's kind of where it started because it wasn't there in game two as consistently. Um, right, because we saw a good defense, I think, from Denver, like in the second quarter of game two.
Yeah.
Um, right, and then after that, it kind of just torpedoed, and Miami was just so good in the fourth quarter of game two that it didn't even really matter at that point. But again, like you did see some because even Jokic, right? I mean, defensively, he had a couple of blocks. Um, right, and again, we already mentioned Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon. So that's kind of just the thing there is for Denver is can their defense be solid, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing for them. We know that Denver's offense pretty much is going to be really good, more often than not, right? Because
Yeah.
we know Jokic is pretty much a lock to get a certain amount offensively, right? And then after that, we know Jamal Murray is going to be relatively consistent. He's been really good these playoffs, right? He wasn't good in game two,
Mhm.
right? But that was like his first really bad playoff game in a while. Probably not since I think the Phoenix series, right? I
Yeah.
think in the Phoenix series he had a couple of stinkers. Denver's just going to have to take the L on Jimmy and stop doubling him. Yeah, I mean, because again, the thing is, he's still a good passer, and they run a lot of offense through Jimmy. So it makes sense where it's like, that probably also leads to a lot of open Miami shots, right? Where you're doubling Butler, And then you're leaving like a Duncan Robinson wide open or Max Strus or Gabe Vincent. Yeah, Heat shooters as of right now are more. Yeah, exactly. Because we know Miami. It's kind of funny in the regular season they were bad from three, right? But
Yep.
in the playoffs they've been really good, and it's not like they don't have good 3-point shooters. Um, sometimes they can be up and down, but you have to respect Max Strus, right? You have to respect Gabe Vincent. You got to respect Duncan Robinson, Kevin Love,
Mhm.
Lowry. They have a lot of good shooters. Even Caleb Martin has shot
Yeah.
really well. So you can't leave a lot of these guys alone. And the way they run their offense, even though it looks, kind of awkward at times, right? But like we know, if Bam is up near the 3-point line or at the top of the key, right? Or if Jimmy Butler's kind of, driving and kicking, we know there's going to be a shooter wide open for the most part now. And we've even seen like with Duncan Robinson and Evolution where he's getting those backdoor cuts off of Bam,
Yeah.
right? Because he wasn't really doing that as much, right? Back when he was more of a starter during the regular season and the playoffs, right? Like in the bubble, he was almost strictly a 3-point shooter, and even
Spot
the
up.
follow, right? But now he's a lot more dangerous because he can use his threat as a shooter again to get open layups at the basket because you have to guard him, you have to respect him, right? A guy that's a movement shooter that can hit those type of 3-point shots that isn't just a spot up threat. Those are really dangerous players to guard because you always have to account for them and you have to run and chase them around. That's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah. It's
So
rough.
that's going to be the key for Miami to win this series is they're going to have to shoot pretty well from three. They're not going to win games like this where they don't shoot well from three because that's a big part of their offense
Yeah.
so far in these playoffs. Because you have Jimmy and Bam that can attack and get downhill. Even Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin can do that at times, right? But Miami's at their best when the threes are falling. Denver can win games not shooting that well from three because they can get other types of shots, right? And so can Miami at times, right? But obviously with Denver, Jokic can get any shot he wants. Jamal Murray can get any shot he wants. Um, right? But Bam doesn't necessarily do that as much, right? Because he's not a
Right.
threat from the outside. He can from mid range, but still, right? Like you prefer if you're Miami Bam attacking the paint, versus settling.
Sure.
But those are the shots that Denver's going to give him, and he's been making them for the most part. Um, but then again with Butler, yeah, he's got to be a little bit more aggressive. But like I said, this one kind of came down to just you know a lot of guys from Miami just didn't show up on offense,
Hmm.
and Denver stepped up their defensive game. So I think that's kind of the takeaway from here.
Yeah.
And now, right, home court, right? Denver took it right back after Miami took it from them in game two.
Yep.
So, now Miami's going to have to win, the next game. Or if they, because if they lose the next game, then they're probably not going to win the series.
Yeah. Um, and I guess we should probably preview next game a little bit. Unless we have anything more to say about this one, because honestly, I think you summed it up perfectly. There was a huge momentum shift, especially in terms of the effort from these teams. It's
Yeah.
kind of
Michael
seems like we're on a
Porter
seesaw. It keeps on flip flopping. So in the first game, Denver came out, showed out, had great effort on all fronts, and then Miami kind of looked a little sluggish. But then in game two, it was the complete opposite. And now in game three, we're back to Denver having the momentum. So I don't know. I guess, did you have anything more to say about this game, or did you want to move on to, the preview?
Yeah, and we can pretty much move on. Like I said,
Okay.
Michael Malone, he challenged his guys after
Yeah.
game two, and they stepped up in game three.
Do you think Spo's going to challenge his guys? I mean, that's kind of a given. I
Yeah,
think he is.
I think so.
Yeah. Um, and let's see, when's the next game? It looks like it's going to be Friday. So on
And
Friday, June
have
9th,
a live stream.
yeah, we will have a live stream for sure. After that game. So, right now the series is 2-1. Denver holds the cards in their hand, but I don't know. I think Miami's gonna probably win just because they're at home. I don't think they're gonna lose both at home. We did see them do this in Boston. But Denver is no Boston. I think Denver's smarter than Boston, coaching wise, players wise, whatever it may be. I'm not gonna say they have more experience, but I feel like
They got the
they
best player.
exactly. When you have the best player in Jokic, it's hard to yeah, you can't compare Boston and Denver, I don't think. So, looking at that game, I feel like, keys to victory for Denver, I would probably say, once again, Jokic, Jamal Murray, maybe Michael Porter Jr. They all have to have a great game and they have to be solid on defense. And, I feel like, Denver hasn't really, played like Boston in the sense where they've given, guys like Caleb Martin, Struess, easy threes. I feel like Boston was kind of letting them shoot, which is a bad strategy considering those guys are pretty decent shooters when they're hot. So I feel like them continuing to limit the amount of threes that these guys um, limit the amount of high percentage threes that these guys can take. I think that's also another key to victory for Denver. And then I guess to move on for Miami for me, I feel like Bam has to have a better offensive game. Um, and a better defensive game. And obviously, the other guys, specifically the shooters, they've got to be a lot better, more consistent. And somebody else has to step up. And maybe Hero comes back. I don't know, because I feel like I heard there was a rumor that he doesn't want to come back and, mess up their groove or something like that. I think that was what the report was, something along those lines, which I understand. But at the same time, they clearly need him because, I feel like he and Jamal Murray, I'm not going to say they're on the same tier, but, they do have that ability, that intrinsic ability to be able to hit those tough shots off the dribble, with like 1 second left on the shot clock or something like that, And I feel like that's something that Miami's missing. You said that as well. So, I feel like the keys to that would probably be Bam having a better game, Jimmy having a better, consistent, game through all 4 quarters, or how many quarters he plays. Um, and then, like I said, the other guys stepping up, and maybe Tyler Hero coming back. So, what are your keys to victory for both these squads?
Yeah, I'd say it's probably, basically the same thing. We know
Okay.
with Denver, again, we know what they have to do, right? We know Jokic and Jamal Murray have to play at a high level.
Yeah.
And then you got to have a few other role players step up. Again, it's kind of interesting, right? Because again, we've talked about in the past, role players usually play better at home, and they really
Mhm.
didn't for Miami. Um, so that script has to be flipped. And again, through the first 2 games, it definitely felt like Denver was giving up a lot of open shots for Miami, right? Because in
Yeah.
game one, Miami had a lot of really good looks. They just didn't hit them. And then in game two, they hit all of them. But in game three, again, I still feel like Denver, in terms of the contest and the effort, it was much better, right? Because again, if they play defense like that, it's gonna be harder for Miami to hit those type of shots
Yeah.
unless, they just have, one of those, I don't want to say lucky, right? But kind
Sure.
of those, yeah, I guess I might as well say
It's
it, right?
lucky.
Like kind of
It's
those lucky
lucky.
shots at, yeah, where guys hit ridiculous shots at the end of the clock. So if Denver's defensive effort is similar, they might be able to win game 4 as well. It just
Hmm.
kind of comes down to, again, with Miami, like you said, right? Can you get Butler and Bam a little bit better? But also, you need much better play from the role players. And like you said, Tyler Hero, he's the other guy where if he comes back, can he make a big difference?
Right.
Um, because because again, like we both feel like they need him. And again, they survived right in this series, right? It's not like they're down 3-0, right? But he probably needs to play next game. Because again, if they lose game 4, right, then the series is pretty much done, right? They're gonna
Right.
be down 3-1. And in theory, yeah, they can come back, but if you lose both games in Miami, right, and then that means you got to win and make up for that by getting another game in Denver, and that's probably going to just be really difficult. Um,
Sure.
so again, a lot's just varying on the 3-point shooting as we saw, right?
Yeah.
Because again, but it is kind of wild though, because again, Denver doesn't need to shoot well from 3 in order to
No.
win. Miami, I feel like does.
Sure.
For the most part, unless again, like we saw them against the Knicks win, right? But the Knicks offensively are not the same as the Nuggets, right? So
It's
you
you
just
can't
you
compare.
can't compare,
No.
one matchup to the other, right? Just
Mm-mm.
like Boston is not the same, as Denver,
Right.
right? So because like for Bam, right, he struggled against Boston, right? Because again, they had more bigs defensively, that are pretty solid rim protectors, right?
Right.
Horford, Robert Williams, right?
Right.
Obviously, they're not as tall as Jokic, but they're better defenders, right?
Right.
Whereas in this series, who's the guy that's keeping Bam away from the basket? It's not really anybody for the
No.
most part. Right now, Bam's also hitting a lot of tough, short range jumpers. But again, it's night and day compared to Boston. So
Yeah.
it feels like what he's doing is still relatively sustainable. It's
Right.
just you need other guys to come along for the ride because again, you can't have your starting, you know, 5 only really have like what, basically like 50 points, from 2
Yeah.
guys, and
Not against
then
Denver. No.
yeah, then after that just 15, right? That's just 65 points, and that's just not enough. You need
Yeah.
because again, like Vincent and Struess and Love, that's a combined what, 5 for 22. That's
Yeah.
awful.
Yeah.
So
That's
I mean,
terrible. They
yeah,
shot
exactly. So I mean,
37% from the field. That I mean, there's no excuse for that in my opinion, except for
exactly.
they
And a
play
lot of the
bad.
bricks, yeah, and a lot of the bricks came from those 3 guys specifically. Now,
Exactly.
again, we'll just have to see because that's going to be the key for them is can you get a better shooting performance out of your role players? And again, I feel like Tyler Hero, if he comes back, he can help.
Sure.
Um, it is you do wonder because again, he's a guy that Denver could attack defensively. Because even before his injury, he's never been a strong defender. right? Even though he's got a little bit more size at 6'4", 6'5", he's got short arms. Um, not super athletic. So, we'll have to see, what Denver does because we've seen Denver, right? Once they find out, what they can do, they'll just pick you apart
Exactly.
and they're going to keep on doing the same thing over and over until you figure out a way to stop it, right?
Yeah.
Which again, there's no reason not to. We saw, like Moverse in the chat said, right, where Denver, every time Aaron Gordon was, somewhere around the basket and he was sealed, they would just dump the ball as quickly to him as possible, and he'd go up and he'd either get to the free throw line or he'd score.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not that complicated. Sometimes you just gotta attack the mismatches when they're there. And
Yeah.
again, if the other team has no answer for it, you keep going for it. So it's going to come down to, does Miami have any answers? Because we saw the zone defense, like I said, just not be as effective this game because Denver
Right.
kept attacking the
Yep.
basket.
And they kept
Um,
on baiting that switch, and then like you said, you've
yeah.
got people who are 6'3", 6'4", 6 feet even, Kyle Lowry on Aaron Gordon. I don't think that's gonna, work out in your favor.
So yeah, like I said, game 4 I feel like should be a closer game.
Me
I mean, I
too.
guess this game was close in the first half, but I think game 4 could be closer to game 2.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like it's a back and forth game.
Yep.
Even though Denver had a big lead at one point in game 2, right? But it was close for
They
most of the
sold.
game. Yeah, exactly. So I mean, like, and that's I feel like game 4 is gonna be the swing game, like we saw in a lot of these other series, right? Because again, if Denver wins game 4, then the series is pretty much done. Obviously Miami could win another game to extend it, right? But I just, again, we've seen a lot of the teams go down 3-1, as of late, and they haven't come back. We even saw a team come, that was down 3-0 and come back, but they haven't been able to close the deal. I just feel like when it's 3-1, 3-0, you're pretty much done.
Yeah.
But obviously, if Miami wins game 4 and ties it back up, back to Denver, right? Then all the pressure goes back to Denver because then they have to win game 5.
Yep.
They can't lose in Denver again, or
No.
else they have a chance at losing the series. So it's going to be back and forth. I don't know, like, because it's hard. Because, like you said, I feel like it should be 2-2. Because I feel like you'll get a better performance. I don't think you'll have back-to-back horrible performances by
Right.
Miami. But it's just kind of, I'm just wondering, the defense that Denver had, was it sustainable in the next game? Because again, if Miami gets some of the looks that they were getting in this game in the next game, then they probably are going to lose.
Yeah.
We'll just have to see. But I feel like game 4 is going to go either way. I'm not ready quite
Okay.
yet to commit to Miami.
Sure.
But I do feel like they should bounce back.
Yeah.
After this game where I thought again they were bad in the second half, but
Yeah.
you just never know because again they were in danger of losing game 2, right? Because I think the going into the fourth they were down by what 8 points. And I
Yeah.
think it was 83-75, and I
Mm-hmm.
think there was a stat where Miami is 4-5 when they're down by 8 going into the fourth in the playoffs, and every other team is 1-41.
Yeah.
So if you're
It's
gonna
wild.
beat Miami, you got to be up a substantial amount if you want to make sure that you put them away. Because if it's a close game and it's the fourth quarter, they have a real chance of winning. So that's kind of what I'm expecting. I'm expecting a closer performance, and I think it will go down to the wire. Unless Denver's figured some stuff out defensively. Because if they figured stuff out defensively, then there's probably not much Miami can do. But again, Tyler Hero is the other X factor because he hasn't come back yet, and
Mm-hmm.
we'll just have
That's
to
what
see.
I'm waiting on.
If he plays in game 4, they should have a better chance to win, I think.
Yeah. I'm gonna stick with my guns and say that there's probably gonna be a split. But before we move on, I don't know what this is, but look at this screen chat. Why did they use Jimmy's profile picture like that? Like why does he have the dreadlocks still? Anyways,
Yeah.
yeah, we can move on to our next topic of discussion, which is the rumors, I guess, that we do have to
Yeah.
address
I think that's
and
his
the
official
news.
picture he took on media day.
Yeah, I know it's cringe, but
Yeah.
I don't think Gabe will be in foul trouble like he was today. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Some
that's a
of
good
those
point.
calls were kind of bad. I thought where like it was more so like he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, right? Like
Right.
he had the one possession where like, he was just in the way and Aaron Gordon crashes into him, after
Yeah,
what really should have been a turnover.
sure.
And I think he had the other one where I think he was on Jokic, right? And I think he kind of like grabbed him a little bit. When they were, kind of fighting, and I think Jokic was posted up around the free throw line.
Mm-hmm.
And it's again, they're like 50-50 calls, right? Because we had a couple of possessions, right, where like, somehow Kyle Lowry and Caleb Martin are, strong enough to like, slam and throw
Sure, I get
Jokic
it.
out of the way. Where it's like, but either way, I don't think officiating is what cost Miami the game. They just
Heck
shot
no.
poorly. I mean,
Yeah,
there were definitely some instances, where yeah, they weren't great calls, right? Bam got fouled a couple of times, and they should have called it, but again, it's like if you shoot 31% from three and 37% from the field, and some of that's affected by the foul shots, you're probably just not going to win.
Yeah.
Especially again, Denver shot over 50% from the field and got to the line more. So I mean, and neither team really turned the ball over a ton. And that's also kind of key too, right? Because with Denver, if you turn the ball over a lot, they're gonna get out and run, but they didn't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, right, when Miami was missing all those shots, right, then Denver, that's how they were able to get out and run. Because every time, again, you take a forced shot or turn the ball over, Denver's gonna get out and run, and it's gonna be a quick 2 or 3 points the other way. But yeah, I do think it'll go. I do think it can go either way.
Okay. So both of
I
you
don't
guys are
feel
saying
like
that.
Miami should win. Yeah, I don't feel like Miami should lose both games at home, but I didn't really. I wasn't sure that Denver was going to lose both games or win both games
Right.
at home. That you would think that they were because they had won. I think what 7, 8 straight at home
Yeah.
going into that game. I think they're 9-1 at home, right? And that
was
one
their
loss
only
was
loss.
Miami.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it was still a game where they had a chance to win. I still think Miami let go of the rope, but hey, Jamal Murray had a chance to tie it up at the end, but still,
Yeah.
I think Game 4 will be a closer game the whole
Sure.
way through. I don't
I
think
agree.
we'll see a scenario where it's like close for like the first half, and then the other team
Yeah.
runs away. But we'll have to see. You would
Yeah.
think Miami would be the more likely one just because of how again you should see a bounce back effort from them. But I think they need Hero. I
Yeah.
don't.
I
I don't
agree.
know. Yeah, I don't feel as good about the split if Hero doesn't play because I thought he was going to play tonight.
Me too. Um, but yeah, I'm still confident on the split. And I guess we
Mhm.
should move into the news and rumors stuff. You want to take that
Yep.
away, starting with I guess Chris
Yeah.
Paul, right?
Yeah. So obviously, Chris Haynes comes out with, in a bomb of a report, right? Putting out that Chris Paul was told by Phoenix that he's going to get waived. Kind of a weird scenario after that because then we had other reporters come out and say like, no, that's not what's happening. But I feel like that's what's happening. But
Probably.
yeah. But regardless, because again, I think Shams and Woj were putting out, like they'll weigh their options in terms of trades, in terms of like I think waiving versus stretching. Um, I feel like right now I'm gonna just go out and just on a limb and say I don't think a team is trading for him. I mean, just the fact that the waiving thing was out there, like I don't see it. I don't see a
Yeah.
team trading for him. And the thing is with Phoenix, I feel like you're at a point where you're gonna have to be the team that gives up something to get rid of him.
Yep.
Because again, he's an older player on a big contract. You don't have to fully guarantee it, right? Because I think that was kind of the talk about, waiving versus stretching. Because if they waive him and cut him, they could also stretch his contract. I think over like 5 years,
Yeah.
so it's
Something
like
like that.
3 something million over 5 years, which is probably the preferable route, right? Versus
Mm-hmm.
just cutting him and having that entire salary off the books for a couple seasons. But it was definitely surprising. I did not expect that.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had heard rumors about them looking to move off of him, but on our last episode, there was an insider rumor that was like, "Oh, Chris Paul's more likely to stay, and Aiton's the one that's gonna go." And I'm like, I don't believe that. I'm
Yeah.
like, I just did.
Even though both their
Yeah,
values are so low, I mean,
exactly.
you do
And
have
then
to measure it.
right, and then we got a report from Woj that was like they're still looking to probably move Aiton.
Right.
So they might be cleaning house. Obviously they're not gonna waive Aiton, right? They're gonna
No.
if they trade him, they're gonna trade him. Or if they move him, they're gonna trade him. But it was definitely a shock to my system because,
Yeah.
like I
Me
said,
too.
I didn't expect waiving him. But again, if you can't get something back for him and you don't feel like, you want him, then you might have to do that. But it's just odd because, again, they're a way over the cap team. They're going to be over the cap regardless, even if they waive him. So you don't really have the means to replace him with somebody much better. Um, so it's kind of just a weird scenario, but I feel like it also could just be a money saving
Okay.
situation.
Right.
Because, again, it's like, you know, he didn't really help you out much. He got hurt. And that's probably not going to change the rest of the way. So, at this point, again, I mean, it just kind of feels like at this point this is where it's headed. It
Yeah.
was weird how we got different reports afterwards, but I do feel like he's probably at this point gonna get waived because I just don't see a team trading for him at that contract, even if it's like the 15 million where they don't fully guarantee it. I just don't see it because I just don't know what team wants him at that contract. And again, like I still feel like Phoenix is gonna have to give up something to get rid of him. I don't think you have to give up something to get rid of Aiton, even though, like you
Right.
said, both of their values are really low. But I definitely think you have to do that for Chris Paul. And why
Ye-
would Phoenix do that when you gave up a boatload of stuff to get Kevin Durant?
Do
At
you
this point,
think?
I just kind of wonder. Hmm?
No, continue.
Yeah. At this point, I just kind of wonder if he were, if he gets waived, where does he go? But you can go
Right.
on and say what you're gonna.
I was gonna say, with the conflicting reports, do you think, we could be potentially seeing a Aiton and Chris Paul package, being dished out by Phoenix or not really? Because I personally don't think so. I think, if
I,
they're throwing out the waiving, if they're using the language of, he's being waived or he's, they're planning to waive him, that means it's pretty much set in stone. And the other stuff is probably just damage control. So I don't foresee them doing that, but I was just curious, if you thought there could be a package. But I don't think any
yeah.
team would buy on that one.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think you're gonna be able to combine both of their salaries or
Yeah,
trade both. I feel like you're probably more likely to get something back for Aiton.
right,
Obviously they can explore, hey, what are we going to get back if we trade Chris Paul? But I just don't think anybody wants him on that contract,
right,
right? Now, if he gets waived and then you can sign him, for the minimum, then yeah, sure, right? I'm sure a lot of teams would take that,
sure,
especially because if he's on the minimum, then you don't have to guarantee that he starts. Um, but at the same time, again, like I just wonder where is he gonna go? Because
yeah,
there had been names that had been passed around, but I just don't know at this point, and I'd have to see him get waived first. But it almost kind of feels like that him and his agency, kind of put that out there, right? That like, hey, Phoenix is gonna waive me. To kind of put it out there. So it's like, hey, I mean, this is Phoenix's thing that they're doing right now. Versus like, because we don't normally hear stuff like that this early, right?
yeah,
Usually it just kind of happens in the off season.
hmm
I don't think I've ever heard in the middle of a finals, right, a player that's on a contract where you're like, oh, this guy is getting waived, right?
yeah.
Unless
It's
it's
kind of
like,
wild.
like a role play, like a guy that doesn't really play at all. But like, this is a guy that's on a big contract. I think if he gets waived, CP zero rings is gonna take.
Holy
Yeah,
hate,
but I mean that's what LCP zero rings.
hell, holy hate.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean that is what he's gonna have to do at this point. Because again, like there'd be no real point in him playing on a non-playoff team. Because again, he's 38,
Mhm.
probably doesn't have too many seasons left. I mean, the report was suggesting that he wants to play several more years
Yeah, he said a
and
couple
also
more.
play for a contender. I don't think DeAndre wants to be. Oh, DeAndre, yeah, no, I don't think he wants to be. I think the
Mm,
feeling is mutual. To be
yeah,
honest, when he signed that contract, you got to remember, in the offseason, they didn't even offer it to him. They
no.
just waited as long as possible. Then Indiana offered him a
I
contract, and
remember
they
that.
just
Yeah.
matched. Yeah, exactly. And they didn't sign him to an extension the year before, when pretty much any young guy that plays well gets that extension going into that season, right? That
I think
always
it's an
happens. But
attitude issue with him, man. You could clearly see it in the finals or the finals, the playoffs this year.
yeah, because he was great in their playoff run that got them to the finals. Gets injured every playoff. Are we talking about Chris Paul? Or are we talking about
I
Aiton?
think he's talking
Because I
about
feel
Chris
like
Paul.
okay. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, Chris Paul gets hurt every year.
It's every
Aiton,
year.
he had the surprise injury, I think, in this game 6. And again, we don't know what happened, but he's been
Yeah, quote
relatively
unquote.
durable. But yeah, Chris Paul is definitely the guy and that's kind of the danger of if you acquire him through a trade, anyways. Because again, like if you trade for him and he's making a lot of money, he's no guarantee to play a lot, right? And
Yeah.
again, at this age, you're gonna have to manage him anyway. And they kind of did that the last couple of seasons, right? They did it last year where he missed a decent amount of time and he still got hurt. I think as the playoffs went down, and then I guess it happened this year as well.
Yeah.
So, but on a minimum contract, right? I think a lot of teams would go for that because again, it's kind of the same with the Westbrook thing, where it's like, you know, on a max contract where he's making $40 million and he's taking up what like a third of your cap space. Probably don't want that, right?
No.
But on a minimum contract where not only is he making next to nothing, but you don't have to really guarantee him anything, right? Then that's kind of a steal. Holy
Yeah.
lag.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't want to say anything, but we're good now. It was like when you were talking, but we all heard you. But yeah, enough with the CP0 rings hate. Do you think there's any destination? What do you think the ideal destination for him would be? Because I kind of like. I would probably say, one that I'm interested in is probably the Lakers. I don't know if I'm like the only one on that, and I don't know if they would even do that. I don't even know if that's possible, but that would be pretty cool to see LeBron and Chris
Well,
Paul link
he
up.
gets bought out and if he gets waived, I guess, and it's a minimum contract, yeah, he could go there.
Yeah.
And that's kind of I think what Woj kind of was posturing in a way where he mentioned something like, ha ha ha, yeah, I know that's funny. um, but
Whatever, dude.
Yeah, but it's funny though. But yeah, I think Woj was kind of putting out like, yeah, the two LA teams would love to have him. Um, and again, we know why, right? We know like LeBron has a great relationship with Chris Paul. I guess with the Clippers, I mean,
Yeah, that could be up in
I'm
there.
not sure who he has the relationship with there. I mean, I guess it's got to be obviously one of the stars,
Sure.
for sure. I'm not sure which one. Um,
It would probably
but
be Paul
regardless,
George, right?
yeah, yeah, I guess Paul George probably. But it's just I haven't really heard a connection, with
Right.
those guys. I could be wrong, but um, yeah, I mean that makes sense. I mean, again, but I also think if he's on a minimum contract, there should not be a guarantee that he's a starting point guard. Because
Right.
again, I just feel like at this point in his career, obviously he's still good,
Hmm.
but I just don't think, as a starter, it's gonna be that great. Because again, you have to factor in, let's say the Lakers do what they do, right? Potentially Boston, they don't. Yeah, like that
That would
honestly
be nice.
wouldn't be. Yeah, and that was something that wasn't discussed. Let's see who else. Yeah, Lakers, potentially Boston. They
I like
mentioned the Clippers, and
Boston.
again with the Lakers. Yeah, but like let's say with the Lakers, right? Let's say they bring back Rui, they bring back Reeves, they bring back D'Lo, right? Well, then like if you're doing the backup guard thing, right? Then you choose between him and Schroeder, and he's a better player at this
Sure.
point than Dennis. But it's also like two completely different types of players. So it's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't really personally feel like Chris Paul and LeBron are a great fit together. Maybe
Okay.
that's just me. Um, but obviously, again, if he's coming off the bench, right, you can kind of see him in like a Rondo esque
That's what I
role,
was
right?
kind of. That's
Ron-
what I was kind of hinting
yeah,
at.
exactly. Where like he's having these possessions where he's on the floor, and he's easily feeding AD or LeBron the ball, which again we saw Rondo do in the playoffs, and he's a more reliable shooter than Rondo, so. Obviously, there's a factor there as well. And again, like, he clearly has a really good relationship with LeBron. So it wouldn't shock me at all um, if something like that were to happen. And again, on the minimum, that's great, if he's coming off the bench, but I wouldn't trade for him.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like you said, Boston, like Mover said, Boston, I think that's a pretty solid pick because, like you said, they don't really have a true point guard. And
Sure.
I know a lot of people, in Boston feel like they don't really need it. But I do feel like they kind of need somebody to kind of set the table for those guys, especially in close games. Just because it just feels like at times like the ball just kind of just randomly goes wherever it goes, and like it's not always that great. Um, I think he would be a good fit in the Lakers TVA. Well, I don't think Chris Paul's gonna be the man, but I do think
Sure.
having another guy that can run the offense. I feel like having another guy that can create offense, especially late in games, for themselves or others, that's something that would probably help the Lakers
That's
because
why I
again, you
like
don't
that.
want
Yeah.
because you don't want LeBron, to have to do all of that at this point, especially in the regular season, right? Because it's
Hmm.
one thing in the playoffs when it's in a run of like what, like 20 something games or something like that, right? But for an 82 game season, yeah, you definitely want. And then again, that was kind of the idea behind having guys like Austin Reeves or D'Angelo Russell or Rui, just guys that can create their own offense. I think again the retirement thing was kind of random, but I still feel like as long as he's still really good, he's gonna keep playing. If Harden leaves Sixers, that's kind of a weird one.
I don't
I mean,
like
I
that.
guess,
I
but
like the Lakers
but
and
like,
Boston the most. No, no,
I guess
0 rings wouldn't be the man. Dude, okay, hang on. Well, by that logic, I mean, come on. Are we gonna start hating on Dame because he doesn't have a ring? There's tons of ringless players. You know, so I mean,
yeah,
come
like me,
on. Yeah, like I mean, come on
but
now.
not NBA rings, but like, yeah,
Yeah, I know, but I'm just saying, like, I mean, come on, bro. Like, I get it. It's a meme, but calm down, buddy. Calm down. Cause, dude,
it's
I'm telling you, there's no way that we can,
yeah.
just hate on one guy for not winning. There's been plenty of NBA
But
players that never won. I mean, we
but
don't call AI 0 rings. Come on now.
yeah, but
Ridiculous.
the Philly thing is kind of odd because I mean, if Harden leaves, I don't feel like Chris Paul is like the replacement and I wonder how Philly's gonna feel. It's like, hey, we lost Harden, but we got somebody, that's quote unquote even better, Chris Paul.
That's
Dame
like
is thinking about,
diminishing returns.
yeah, exactly. Like you can't lose Harden and then be like, we're gonna replace him with Chris Paul.
Yeah,
That would be right.
it's a
That
loss
would
of
be like
value.
that would be like with the Dallas thing. Like if Dallas told Luca, "Hey, we're letting Kyrie go so we can bring in D'Angelo Russell, buddy." Like, no,
Like, what are
no.
we doing, bro?
Luca would ask for a trade in about 2 seconds. I mean, I feel like he said that every year.
He
I know
said
I'm
it's
on
the
his
same thing with Aaron Rodgers. It's ridiculous.
yeah, and I know on his IG live, I think he mentioned like, yeah, if I were to leave, he and what was it, Knicks? I think he said. Was it Knicks or was it?
It
No.
was Heat, Brooklyn, and the Knicks.
Okay, so also Brooklyn, yeah. So, which again makes sense because with those teams, right? He would be, probably the guy on all of those teams. Maybe
Yeah,
not so much in Miami because of Butler, but
I
still.
still feel like he'd be the number one guy.
Yeah, but like, yeah, like any of those teams, he's would instantly be like, quote unquote, the guy.
Yeah,
Like
number
I
one
said, I feel
option.
like Butler is the guy in Miami right now, but Aaron Rodgers left. He did.
But it took him all those years to leave, though, Movers. That's what I'm saying. It's the same. It's the same script every year. We hear. I don't know, man. I don't know. I don't know what we're gonna do. I might leave. I might not. Like it's the same thing.
I think the
Badly
issue
Beal, same thing. It's the same thing, bro.
badly. I think
I
the
said
issue for
badly. I meant Bradley.
I don't know. I actually didn't hear, to be honest, but I think the thing with Lillard, the other issue is the contract because he's at a point where he's making so much money, and I feel like anybody that trades him or trades for him is gonna end up giving up a lot,
Good
and they
point.
may only get like a handful of like good years, and then like you're gonna be and because I feel like that's what Portland. If I'm Portland, that's what I would want. I would want somebody to overpay to trade for Damian Lillard, right? So that way we can accelerate the rebuild and we can get back a ton of stuff.
Right.
Right. And if the other team gives up picks, right, then down the line you're gonna get their picks as well. That's what I would do if I'm Portland, but I don't know if they're gonna do that because I don't think they're just gonna send Dame somewhere. It would have to be because he wants out.
Yeah, they're not
But
gonna do
you
him
just
dirty.
never
I
know.
don't think. Brad
Brad
Beal is
Beal
in
is
a
the
cruise situation, buddy. That's my point. They're all in bad situations because of their contracts. Rodgers, it took
yeah.
him all these years to leave. So, and Dame, has a little bit more time left on the clock, no pun intended, than Rodgers. You know what I mean? Like, and same with Beal. These guys are younger than Rodgers. And, I don't want to talk about the NFL because this is an NBA podcast. I was just, making an analogy that Russ was never the
Brad
problem. That's all I got to say. You're just spewing random stuff. And Westbrook was the problem. I don't know, what you're talking about in terms of if you're talking about the Lakers, then I guess not really. He wasn't the only problem
He
for the
wasn't the
Lakers.
only problem.
I think it was just depth for the Lakers at that point because you got
And again, you can't get depth with, when you get
exactly.
one guy on a 47.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't really feel like it was the player. I think the decision to get him was the decision that kind of I think, really hurt the Lakers because I just don't think it was a good fit and I didn't understand it at the time
Yeah.
because like again, I thought that it would be I didn't think it would be as bad as it was, but I knew that there was like a world where it's like this is not going to work. I thought they'd be better in the regular season, though. Like, I expected them to still be a good regular season team and then just probably not be as good in the playoffs, but
Yeah.
they weren't even a good regular season team.
So Russell Westbrook, hang on. I want to talk about this. So Russell
I'm assuming.
Westbrook, yeah, doesn't Russell Westbrook has 0 rings? Am I right or wrong?
I suppose you're right.
So,
Although
I
the
mean,
funny thing is
come on.
that if the Lakers had won the title, he'd have 1 ring.
Sure, but Russell Westbrook has 0 rings. So, I guess we should start calling, Russell Westbrook Russ 0 rings. But if you're talking about when he was
Really
playing
good
with
numbers,
OKC, exactly. So if you're talking about when he was playing with OKC, yeah, he was the problem. He was the problem. I don't care.
He
Well,
would have
Russ would have
defended
defended better. Sure, but at the
Probably.
same time, what you'd have no depth. You would have no guys. It doesn't matter. You wouldn't have, the team that you had in the Western Conference. It's just it's ugly, Mo. You can't justify that the Russell Westbrook squad with the Lakers. You can't justify that was a good squad. You can't. They got significantly better at the deadline, not due to the fact that it was because of Westbrook. It was because they got back a lot of players that helped them throughout the rest of the season and through the playoffs as well. Some of them disappeared. Yeah, D'Lo flamed out badly, but through the regular season, most of those guys played pretty well, and you take that package that they got in return, over one Westbrook player in one season. You know what I mean? And, I don't want to dwell on Russell Westbrook too much because, in my opinion, I'm not going to say he's irrelevant, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the playoffs, dude.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. But like back to the Chris Paul thing, I do think that those fits. Like I said, I do like his suggestion about the Boston one. That one's especially again on a minimum contract because again, Boston's kind of in a similar situation, uh, where they is in a similar situation, right? Where like their roster is going to get really expensive. Do you know? Oh my God.
All right, bro.
uh, anyway,
Dude, this guy is
yeah.
hating.
But anyways, but they're kind of in a similar situation as like a Phoenix or a Golden State, where like once they pay both Brown and Tatum that money, right? They're not going to have the flexibility to add a bunch of guys. So if you can get a guy like a Chris Paul on a minimum contract, that would be really good.
Yeah.
Same with those other teams like Lakers or Clippers.
Yeah.
I just don't know because again, I need to wait until he gets waived, and I need to see like how they waive him. I'm assuming if they do, they're going to stretch him. I don't
Mhm.
think they're going to just like cut his contract and then it's like 15 or whatever.
Right,
Because
right,
again,
right.
like if they do that, they're going to be in the same situation with him. It's just they won't have him.
Right.
Whereas if you stretch it, I think that gives them a little bit more flexibility.
Flexibility,
But
yeah.
I don't know. That definitely caught me off guard. That was to me like the biggest shocker of the day. I mean, so many things. Free my man's play. Yeah. Uh,
Forgot
yeah.
about him.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, he did play at times during the regular season. I feel like he's probably done though. I mean,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
could be
We're
wrong,
we're
but
at that point where,
yeah,
guys from that, I guess, draft class in that era,
yeah.
their age is catching up to them. Injuries, all
I mean,
that
that
stuff.
was the Curry
Means.
draft class. I think Blake Griffin, he went number 1.
Yeah.
And at the time he was looked at as the best player in that draft, right? But a lot of injuries, and other things, kind of derailed his career, right? Because when he was in Detroit, he was still a really good player, and then he had the knee injuries, and then
Yep.
that was it. So that was
It
kind of
happens.
unfortunate.
It happens.
But yeah, I mean, so many things happened in the NBA world today. Joe Mazzulla is not the answer. I definitely do think Udoka was better, but I also just feel like again they didn't really have much of a choice, I guess, right? Because what happened? They sent Udoka packing. They suspended him.
Yeah.
And then, again, I think a bunch of their assistants left.
Yep.
So it was kind of thrust into the realm of the rookie head coach, to kind of take over. And again, I think he did okay. He obviously could have done better, for sure. But again, at the same time, right? Like some of the issues that they had in the playoffs wasn't just the coaching. Like some of it was also just bad play. I mean, like
Bad basketball,
again,
man.
I mean, I don't think Joe Mazzulla is the reason for Jaylen Brown having 8 turnovers in a game 7. And of course, Joe Mazzulla can't necessarily just, he's not the guy that injured Tatum's ankle, bro. Just I do agree with that, where I do think sometimes he lets them
Their offense
go
was
too long.
significantly dumbed down. It
Yeah,
was ugly.
but at times also you have to factor in these guys are pros, and they when you're at this level, you kind of have to be smart enough to kind of just figure stuff out because sometimes at this, when you're at that high of a level, there's going to be, some really fast reactions and decisions that you have to make on the fly, right? And we see guys, right, like a Jokic or a LeBron, or a Steph or some of these other superstars, kind of just adjust, to what's going on. And those guys are probably just going to have to get better at that. But they did hire a couple of assistants, if I'm not right, Sam Cassell.
Hmm.
So I think they're going to have guys
There's
that are going to help him
improvements.
out. It's still unfortunate because I do think Udoka was the better coach, and he also gave Boston some more toughness,
Hmm.
which I think that they do miss because they didn't feel like a tough team this year. It felt like
Right.
they got pushed around a few too many times. Just do what you want over Blake Griffin.
I don't even know what that means. I think he
But yeah,
mistyped.
I don't know, but yeah, like it's just kind of funny how like it just felt like there were so many things. Jalen no left Brown. Oh
Oh
my
my
gosh.
god, bro. Aren't you a
But
Celtics fan?
well, hey, you can be a fan of a team and still pick on your guys.
You don't have to tell me about that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the least he could say.
Sure.
Um, but regardless, yeah, it's just crazy how so many things happened in the NBA. It almost felt like the finals kind of took a back seat for most of the day.
Sure.
With so many things that were going on. Some of those things I don't feel like we really need to discuss
No.
because they're more like on the gossipy,
We can talk
side.
about them
But
in the podcast episode that we'll
yeah,
be recording
exactly. But
tomorrow.
yeah, exactly. But no, I guess it didn't go through.
I guess you're saying Jalen no left Brown over Blake Griffin. I think that's what he was saying.
Oh, well, they don't even play the same position. But I
I
mean,
know.
I get it like from the perspective of like you got to try something. Like
Right,
if
right.
whatever you're doing isn't
If
working,
it ain't
sometimes
working, you can't just keep, trying.
yeah.
It's weird.
Sometimes you gotta, try some crazy wild things, right? Like we saw other coaches, right? Like we saw Darvin Ham just, insert Lonnie Walker against
And it
Golden
worked.
State, right? And all of a sudden he is a big difference maker in that series, right? We saw, I think, against the Kings, right? We saw Kerr try out just randomly Moses Moody, right?
Yeah.
And he made a difference at times. Um, so yeah, sometimes you do have to try random things as the coach. Like I said, I don't think it's fair to put all of the Celtics issues on the coach. He again, it's like the Westbrook thing. He was one of the issues, Joe Mazzulla, but he wasn't. I don't feel like the issue.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
I
because
agree.
again, like all right, because at different points, right, they were just so up and down compared to last year. And even some of the weaknesses they had last year were an issue this year, right? Because they had an issue with turnovers at times last year. Um, right? Because the big issue last year was their offense was not as good. It was mainly their defense. This year
Yeah.
it felt like their defense wasn't as effective.
Right.
Um, and both sides of the ball can kind of bleed into each other, right? Like, if you're playing really good defense, but you just can't score, at some point your defense is going to break down, right? Because eventually the other team's just going to start running and getting easy baskets off your misses, right?
Yep.
Same with if you keep scoring, right, but you're not defending at all, right? At some point your offense is going to sputter out, and then you're just going to start giving that other team easy looks. So
Exactly.
yeah, it happens, but it has been an interesting series so far, right? Two of the three games were double digit victories, right? Whereas game two was close, so hopefully game four is a little bit closer, because it has been like kind of a strange ish series so far, But again, it's just kind of been interesting the parity in the NBA where there's been a different matchup, each year. So it feels like that's probably going to continue, with the NBA making the changes to the CBA, limiting, what the teams at the top can really do in terms of flexibility. But,
Yeah.
again, like, we're covering it, we're here,
Yeah.
so it's
We're
definitely
here,
been
man.
an
It's
interesting
been
one
lit.
so far, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been fire. And I guess is that all that we have for rumors as well that we want to get into
Yeah.
tonight?
Because I feel like, some of the other stuff we should
Yeah.
probably just
We'll
save.
save. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think my message isn't going through because I cursed. Oh,
Oh,
oh, that's
yeah.
what you said. Okay.
Yeah. Come on, man. You got to keep it, family friendly. Even though, it's funny. Actually, I'm not even going to say that on stream. But yeah. Yeah, please try and, be family friendly. Be yourself, obviously. But, YouTube is, they do what they want to do. They have guidelines and, we follow them or try our best to. But I guess since we've covered the game, we covered the preview, we covered the rumors in the news stuff today. We'll talk about more news stuff in the actual episode of the podcast, which also will drop on Friday, and we're going live Friday as well after the game 4, which should be a fun one. I think it's going to be interesting. Might be even the best one yet. But I think we've run our course. We've hit that hour mark. We try and live stream for an hour. Don't drag on too long, too late, especially it is 12:30. What's up? Why are you laughing?
Chat.
I
Yeah,
said
dude,
playing
I
the
see the
white
message.
boys over Blake. Let me know if you can see that. Yeah, I can see that, dude. We're just not gonna address it. Anyways, once again, we appreciate everybody for coming through. The chat makes the live stream, if you want us to be honest. So, the more chatters that we have in here, the more conversations we can have with you guys, and the more fun we can have, and the more often we can do this. But once again, appreciate everybody for coming through. We will be live Friday again after the game. Catch us here. Same channel. Everything's the same as it always has been. But yeah, thank you guys for coming through, and we will see you on the next one.